Hello, TNT, and welcome to another edition of AM Prime on WESN Content Capital. I'm Keaton Shaw. Thank you very much for joining us as we have a full program packed during the next hour and a half. Let me get into our first conversation. It focuses actually on the transition from childhood to adolescence, but specifically for girls. So let me ask you this question. In society currently, do you tend to have a more protective approach or stance when raising a girl as compared to raising a boy? Do you think that teenage boys face less difficulties or challenges associated with the transition from childhood to adolescence when compared to that of girls? Well, actually, Dr. Gabriel Hossein has written an entire column on this. It's entitled A Dangerous World for Girls, and she explains exactly her approach, or at least her thoughts, on this particular matter. She joins us this morning, actually, on the program. Good morning, Dr. Hossein, and welcome to Brain.
Good morning, and thank you so much for having me this morning.
Well, thank you very much for joining us. Dr. Hossein, let me start with the title because it truly gives a synopsis of your column as a whole, entitled Dangerous World for Girls. When you speak about the transition from childhood to adolescence, why is it that you've chosen to focus specifically on this world being dangerous for girls as compared to boys?
Thanks so much. That is a great question. And indeed, the world is dangerous for boys as well, but it's dangerous for boys and girls predominantly in different ways, ways related to the fact that they're female or male. So for us, it's always important to remember that everything about our lives, including childhood, adolescence, and the transition from childhood to adolescence, are gendered, meaning they impact boys and girls differently and sometimes unequally, depending on our beliefs and values or our stereotypes or the vulnerabilities associated specifically with being a girl or a boy. I wrote that column, which was published in the Newsday last week, Wednesday, and is available open access for anyone to read. I wrote that column because I'm actually the mother of a teenage girl. And so rather than it being a statement about what is or is not happening to boys, it was really a reflection on parenting and mothering in our society. And you know, Keith, I think that when we pay attention to the lives and negotiations of people who are performing care work, whether for children, for the sick, or for the elderly, we come to understand something important about the world and about what needs to change. In this case, I was thinking about what it's like to raise a girl that's going from childhood into adolescence. And adolescence is a stage of growing independence, growing self-definition, and growing self-responsibility as you enable teenagers to begin to make decisions for themselves in a way they weren't as children. For girls in particular, their main vulnerability is to sexual violence. And that sexual violence can happen anywhere and at any time. Now, we know that it can happen in the home and predominantly happens in the home. So for girls, reporting to the Children's Authority of Trinidad and Tobago, sexual violence is above and beyond all other form of child abuse, what they are vulnerable to. Boys, for example, may be much more vulnerable to neglect than girls, but definitely sexual violence, the risk begins from very young, younger than 3 years old, and continues, and this is the important point, continues for the rest of women's lives. I don't know about your public out there, but when I speak to women, I know I can hear their stories of multiple instances of large and small sexual violence repeated, and not only by men, and that's, I think, important to say, but predominantly by men. And it happens repeatedly, potentially at different stages. And what protects girls from it is the extent to which their parents are protective, the extent to which their parents warn them about dangers and the extent to which they're able to take responsibility to protect themselves. But my column was really expressing an emotional sadness and a regret and even an anger that this is the world that we as adults, all of us as adults, have created for children to grow up in, where they must learn about the risks of violence to themselves and learn to protect themselves as much as possible from an age at which these should not be the part of
Dr.
the
Smith,
norm.
if I could just interject, your column last week actually spoke, and you just mentioned it again, as to how that transition from childhood to adolescence is gendered. And you spoke about the different risks for girls as compared to that of boys. If I were to actually refer to a earlier column that you wrote, it's dated Tuesday, 20th of February, 2024, it's entitled The Killing of Our Teens. You actually also spoke to how masculinity actually poses a greater threat to girls, adolescent girls, as compared to boys. I'm wondering, based off of your explanations of it being gendered, if you can just explain that a bit further. It seems that both are linked.
Absolutely. And, in as a Caribbean feminist, we our goal is not to demonize men. Our goal is to highlight the injustices of the world in which women live, highlight the damage that our dominant notions of masculinity cause for men, and point to the way that and the reason why patriarchal ideals need to be transformed. So we are here collectively, you and I, having a conversation about the dangers of patriarchal ideals of masculinity. But not just that, we're having a conversation about, as you said, coming of age in the Caribbean and what it's like for parents, what it's like for children, and how much still needs to change. Now, for boys, I'll start with girls and masculinity. If you are an adolescent girl, 12 or 13 years old, chances are your parents are warning you about the kinds of access that you give boys online, the kinds of pictures that you share, the fact that they can be shared as well, the types of conversations that you have with boys, and the ways that that could lead to a particular kind of sexual risk. Your parents are probably also concerned about if you go out somewhere, for example, C3 or Movie Town, who's with you, who are you meeting, that you don't meet anybody that you don't know, any younger males, any older males, and the risks of, in some way, experiencing kidnapping or experiencing some kind of sexual violence, including telling girls if you're in a mall, go to the bathroom together. If you're in a party as an adult, go to the bathroom together, including, as I said in the column, don't accept drinks from anybody. And these are real risks. I know women who have accepted drinks from people who they thought were friends as adults and end up being drugged and end up being raped. And so these are not theoretical concerns. These are concerns that women have navigated their whole lives, and they are at risk. Their greatest risk or their greatest threat is men and male violence. Now, that doesn't mean that all men are bad. It doesn't mean that all men are going to harm women. Men are also, because of notions of masculinity, also in many ways a threat to men. So I've also written, and I'm glad that you asked this question, I've written about the risk to teenage boys. We've seen, for example, in the last year, a rise in teenage boys being killed as part of gun violence and gang violence as innocent bystanders. And teenage boys will tell you that from the time they're 13, they experience a very different world in terms of the risks that masculine expectations hold for them. But those risks are very different. Generally, they're not sexualized. They are very dangerous in very different ways and can result in all kinds of policing of their behavior, bullying, forced entry into gangs, and of course, risks of things like gun violence and death, which we've seen. I think the conversation we want to have is how do we measure the development, the advancement, the satisfaction of the society that we're living in? And if we look at the lives of children what does that tell us about how far we need to go?
Now, another part which is rather intriguing is that this morning you mentioned that this transition also forms a part of self-identity. People start learning about who they are, what they want in life, or what they want to be, what they want to do. All of that is a part of it. So it stretches to a point of a sense of independence when it comes to thinking. Yet, as you've pointed out, it doesn't necessarily mean that the independence that boys would experience is that what girls experience. How much of this actually is a greater social issue beyond just the risk associated with crime? It seems as though it's also, to a certain extent, withholding the development of young girls and females as a whole.
Well, what happens to girls is that, let me start with boys for a second. What happens with boys is that masculine ideals end up constraining their lives from very young. They learn, for example, there are certain ways they can't behave, certain toys and ways of playing that they're not allowed. Those harms begin to set in from early. And by the time they're in secondary school, these shape things like their career choices. It shapes how they see and treat girls, for example. It also shapes the risks that girls begin to face. And it also shapes the idea that boys are not meant to be invested in the struggle for gender justice because somehow it doesn't affect them, or somehow feminism is a women's issue when in fact it is not. It is an issue of relationships between the sexes as well as among them, in which all of us should be invested in creating a better world for everyone. But I think for girls, something specific, and maybe there are parents out there who are not having these conversations with girls, but in many ways, parents should be. So girls face particular risks online. They face particular risks in things like the photos that they share. They face particular risks in terms of the photos that they share privately, as well as the photos that they share publicly, and how they could then be targeted, how they could be shamed, for example. Girls also face particular, and we've seen this happen with adult women as well, and there have been successful cases that have gone to court in Trinidad and Tobago that have pointed to this being a lifelong risk. Girls also face a risk of things such as sexual harassment in schools, and this has been indicated by girls who have talked about sexual experiences of sexual harassment in schools, which they would prefer not to have, and it shows up in some of the studies of adolescence. And I also want to be clear that what we're teaching girls from a very young age is that they don't share the same freedom and mobility as boys, because as we know, women must come in earlier. They are not out as late and they are not out in as many spaces as men because it is less safe for them. So they're in earlier, in fewer spaces, and more chaperoned by others, whether women and men, when they are in those spaces, so that women are experiencing a far more constrained freedom and mobility from men, and it starts at a very early age. So if parents of teenagers are taking teenage girls out, they are much more likely to want to stay to see, what's happening. They are much more likely to, for example, not let them spend the night because you just don't know whether there's a risk of child sexual abuse that may happen in somebody's home, and depending on who is there, they are much more wary of men, fathers, brothers in the house, uncles who may be there, grandfathers. And so women and men, mothers and fathers begin to teach girls about this risk to their lives, to their health, to their sexuality from a very young age. And I think we have to ask ourselves, and I was writing this as a mother, is this fair? Is this fair? Is it right for their developing brains? And is it normal? We've become normalized to it as adults, but by remaining cognizant of the fact that it is really unjust and it is violent and it is unfair, I think we hold ourselves accountable for the fact that so much needs to change.
Is it because that we've grown so accustomed to this that it's become a norm, that it is no longer thought to be something that we should be rather concerned about? This is something that we have accepted, and therefore it is something that is not necessarily concerning to most parents.
Yeah, it's not just the fact that it has become a norm. I mean, all of us, you included, everyone in your studio, everyone out there watching is aware of the risks of sexual violence against girls from the time they are babies or 2, 3, 4 years old, and in fact to adolescence. And the greatest risk of sexual violence, that is child sexual abuse, is in girls' lives when they are between 10 and 14. So really, just as they're becoming independent is the time that you need to be much more aware of the vulnerabilities they begin to face. Men begin to notice them, adult men. Men begin to say things to them on the street. And so we have all experienced this as women. And and we're all aware that girls are going to experience it because we have not done enough as a society to put our foot down and say that this is absolutely intolerable and should not be happening. But more than it becoming normalized, what has happened is that we put the responsibility on girls and women to protect themselves through their behavior, through limiting their mobility, through the way that they dress, through the way the fact that they may walk on the street, look down when they're passing men in order to not meet their eye. So women are now held responsible, and any woman would tell you this, for keeping themselves safe, predominantly from male violence. And so what we are instituting on girls is that individual responsibility when in fact what they are learning to grow up in is a world in which violence is systemic and therefore requires social norm change, and requires a change in which everyone in the society, women and men, understand that the risks to childhood of violence, of sexual violence in particular, are absolutely intolerable. And so my concern isn't just that it's normalized, it is that from a young age, and I know this as the parent of a teenage girl, you start talking about, what to do and what not to do in order to protect yourself. And that insistence on an individual responsibility, what's called responsibilization of women for male violence. And in some ways, this happens to boys as well, who are told, you can't go here, you can't do this, but their risk of that type of violence is significantly lower. To me, that's the concern. And that's the thing that we've normalized. And that's the thing that remains wholly unfair to women and a sign of their continuing greater inequality.
So, when we speak about these issues, we oftentimes seek solutions, and one of the solutions that is often spoken of, not necessarily pursued, but spoken of, is that of education and a greater level of awareness. That breaks the cycle of it being a norm or inherent qualities that parents adopt as they raise their own child. That being said, what are your thoughts or opinions on the need to actually, because one of the crimes you spoke about, especially when it comes to masculinity, is that of the vulnerability of girls to sexual violence. What is your opinion on there being an approach within the education system to focus on teaching about sex, sexual abuse, or sex, for example? What is your opinion on that being one of the solutions to this issue that you speak of?
I think it's an absolutely essential, necessary solution. And I'm so glad that you raised it. I'm glad that in the media, you're amplifying the necessity for the education system to be able to address these questions of gender-based violence, good touch and bad touch, for example, at primary school, and for both boys and girls, because girls are not the only ones who are vulnerable to child sexual abuse. Even though boys may be at a much younger age, it's still a risk that they face. And I think it is absolutely essential that we have age appropriate. So for those parents who are concerned about information being presented that is not appropriate for children, there are educators out there who are trained to be able to create and provide age appropriate education that addresses children's risk of gender-based violence. It addresses the chances that children may themselves perpetrate gender-based violence or sexual violence, particularly in adolescence, and it addresses across a nation in a standardized way the opportunity that we have as a country to change social norms so that both men and women understand that these are ways of behaving that can make people feel threatened and violated, and can in fact threaten and violate. So we would like, for example, to eliminate sexual harassment from our society. Sexual harassment is a problem for women on the street. Women are told things, shouted things across the street that men never are told and do not have to live with. And I think for men and boys, understanding that they have both a responsibility and to an opportunity to use the power that they have to transform the ways that both they behave and their brethren behave, the men in their lives behave, the men in their workplaces behave. I think that's a real opportunity, and we've seen men take up that challenge, and we've seen men be on the side of creating a better world, both for women and for men. I think that we have to, as a society, continue to advocate for the health and family life curriculum, which is a space to teach social values and is a space to teach about gender-based violence. And it is, in fact, not being used in that way, but it does offer us an incredible opportunity to reach all of the children in our society and to be able to actively and consciously change these kinds of norms very quickly. We would like to see adolescents, teenagers taught about consent, that is, knowing that you have a right to say no, knowing that if something happens to you, you can disclose and that you have a right to expect adults to act a particular way, but also that you have a right to demand that the society that you're living in, the malls, the streets, the cinemas, the schools you're in, the parlor you're in front of, that all of this, you have a right to demand that all of this should be a safe space from which you do not have to protect yourselves. And so the school-based education also gives us the opportunity to continue to teach adolescents about their rights, to demand better from us as adults in the world today. And I'm so glad that you brought this up. And I hope the public continues to demand that we teach gender-based violence prevention in schools, knowing that this is the world that our children are growing into.
Well, Dr. Hussain, with the time that we have left, I w would like you now to explain, do you, in your opinion, is there a fine line between projecting fear or preaching fear of the male gender to girls? Is there a fine line between that versus, well, you need to be very much cautious in your approach and very much cautious in how you go about living your life? How do we now navigate through that? Because it seems to be very, very difficult to try and separate.
That is such a great question. And I think there are risks because, on the one hand, we have to teach girls about the realities of male violence. We have to teach them that they can be in university and have something put in their drink. As I said, I know people, women, that this has happened to. And we're continuing to hear those stories all the time on campuses all over. So these are not fears that are unfounded. At the same time, if you're the parent of a son or a boy, it can feel very unfair. It can feel as if boys and men are continuing to be demonized. It could feel as if there are so many good men out there that would never harm girls or violate them, and will also teach their sons to not be that kind of boy or man. And I think it's important, if you're the parent of a son or a boy, to see yourself as educating them about what the risks of masculinity are and empowering them to be a voice amongst men and boys to say, listen, this is not cool. This is not how we behave. This is not what I'm going to tolerate. This is not what being a man is about in our society. And really empowering your son to be able to be that different kind of man, because that's going to make a huge difference. At the same time, I think one requires some sensitivity to the fact that we are talking about systemic risks. And even while there are perhaps a growing number of men that and boys that will not engage in forms of sexual violence, sexual harassment, adolescent dating violence, and so on, that these are still issues and that we need to discuss them, and that we don't necessarily need to take them personally if they don't refer to us, but we need to recognize that they are difficult social issues. For girls, I think it is important for us to have very honest conversations with them from the time they are out in the world and making decisions. If your girl has a cell phone, she needs to know about what can happen if she's asked to share pictures of herself of all kinds, or if she posts pictures of herself at all kinds, including potentially safe ones. She needs to be aware of when she's in public spaces, what people might come up and talk to her, how to respond to them, how to respond if somebody says when they are at the cinema but they're unsupervised with their friends, listen, let's go here together or let's sneak out together. They need to know what the risks are. We've all been teenagers, Keith. Teenagers think they are invincible. They think parents don't know very much, and they think that they can deal with whatever parents say is going to be the risk in a way that shows how smart and confident and smarter than parents they are. And so we want to give girls that level of confidence, but we have to also teach them what the risks are. So my daughter, for example, in that instance, might have gone to the washroom and left her cup on the table. Now, we were there, but if we weren't there, that's just a habit that she can't develop and then come back and have her drink, because these are real risks that we face. So I think it's important for us to not demonize the messenger. I think it's important for us to not see ourselves as demonizing all men, but I think it's important as parents of boys and girls, and as fathers, as well as mothers or as caregivers who may be both women and men. I think it's important for us to take a stark look at what the realities are out there and make sure that we prepare our girls for those realities, because the data on sexual violence as experienced by women, specifically non-partner sexual violence that women experience throughout their lifetimes, is far, far too high. And so we do need to be data driven. And we do need to work with fathers who are as concerned. And we do need to champion boys and men to be the kinds of allies to ending male violence against girls, but also male violence in their own lives, so that children can come of age in a world that is kinder and safer, in which they really can be children.
Dr. Hussain, I'm glad that you said it the way you did. The realities. I think some people try to focus on this as not necessarily being a reality. Some adopt approach that that's not going to happen to us. Don't worry about it. We're not going to go through that experience. And as I said, I'm glad that you mentioned these are the realities that society is facing and society is plagued with. Dr. Hussain, thank you very much for your time this morning, not only for joining me on the interview, but also for your contribution to the commentary via your columns, your weekly columns. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All the very best to you. Take care. Well, Dr. Hussain's column is available online. As I said, it's a weekly column. You can simply go to newsday.co.tt to read her column. You can look forward to the next one, which I think is being published tomorrow. Ladies and gentlemen, we take a break here on AM Prime, and we'll return shortly to continue this morning's conversations. Stay with us.
Take some time for yourself or spend some time with the family at Sandy Point Village Hotel. Enjoy our various studio and suite apartments, self-contained with their own kitchenettes and Wi-Fi. We also have our famous 100-foot swimming pool and our beachfront restaurant, the Steak and Lobster Grill. And our location in Crown Point puts us near the center of activity, from the nylon pool to the local nightlife. Call us and make your reservations at 639-8533, 389-2378, or email us at sandypointvillagehotel@gmail.com.
Transform your home with PCU Plus. From stylish furniture to the latest appliances, we have everything you need to create your perfect space. At PCU Plus, we offer fair prices and affordable financing options that are cheaper than hire purchase agreements. With convenient locations in San Fernando, Tobago, Arima, and our lifestyle showroom in Barataria, you're never far from the best deals. Visit PCU Plus today and discover why we're the top choice for quality furniture and appliances. PCU Plus, quality you trust, prices you'll love. Visit one of our locations or find us online to start transforming your home today.
Every word, every line, every paragraph depicts a real moment in someone's life. A father, a sister, a mother, a brother. We at Newsday are dedicated to you, the people, and through independent, unwavering journalism, strive to always bring your stories to life. Because your stories are more than just words. Newsday, independent and credible.
The home of Caribbean content is growing, and we welcome you to be a part of the #1 platform for young personalities who are driven to make a positive impact in society. As we continue to reach every corner of Trinidad and Tobago through our daily broadcasts, our social media pages, or through our 75+ digital billboards across the nation, contact us to learn about our competitive rates via marketing at wesncc.com or call us at 628-5835. WESN Content Capital, television with a difference.
Welcome back to the program, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks for being with us as we continue with the conversations. Well, today, yesterday actually was the start of the second week of the new academic year. Most schools, we believe, have reopened. And this morning, as we speak, children are getting ready to attend classes. Some students are actually on their way already to school. There will be those who are already in school. But we spoke about going back to school and the costs associated with going back to school throughout the July-August vacation with a number of guests. This morning we continue that conversation because even though the new academic year has started, people are still struggling to get all supplies. In fact, this was noted by the NGO, Is There Not a Cause, saying, well, is it not a cause that actually has seen an increase in the number of people asking for assistance in getting supplies for their children to go back to school, some starting school for the very first time. I'm joined this morning by the head of the NGO, Mr. Abnel Hector Joseph. She joins us virtually. Good morning, good morning, Ms. Joseph. Thanks for joining us on the program.
Good morning, and thanks for having me on the program again. It's a pleasure.
Well, Is There Not a Cause has been assisting parents since 2003. In respect,
since 2002, but we've been doing back to school since 2003.
Yes, since 2003, in respect to back to school supplies, assisting them buy supplies. for their school children. Now, 2003, 2024, it's 21 years. You would have
Yes.
quite a lot during that time. But in 2024, are you you're stating that you're seeing more and more parents asking for assistance?
Definitely, definitely. I think normally we would it has come more and more over the years. Because the price of books, the cost of living in Trinidad and Tobago is just escalating, and it's going crazy. And there has to be some type of checks and balances. I'm not sure what the politicians have in mind, if they have anything in mind, because clearly they are living good. We can see by the type of cars that they drive, the way that they live. So they are very disconnected from how we live. But what was instructive is that mostly by the even as the last week of school break, and it's like a massive rush, and more or less people will have certain things to be able to maneuver and get themselves in a gear to be able to, get the children functional in school. But this year we found that the list of children, that the amount of parents that were coming, and what I found very instructive is that the parents were saying, listen, we've tried everything. And they would say things like, usually I'm able to do it on my own. But this year, it was very high, and I just couldn't do it because it was like, why did you come so late? They said, we tried, and I think that speaks an effort of people who are not just wanting to sit back and receive handouts all the time, as some people like to portray people in need. But it's just beyond need. There's these things that go around social media that say, if you want to be rich or you want to save money, cut out coffee at certain places, cut out this. But according to somebody, if your salary is not enough, it's not enough. So there is no amount of cutting out of those things, because people are barely making it outside of school, and the year comes along so quickly.
Is this something you see affecting everyone? I know that in Trinidad, we tend to try and speak about the middle class, the lower class, and the upper class. But is this something that that your NGO is seeing being experienced by everyone?
Well, the middle class in Trinidad and Tobago, unless somebody's on the rock, it's disappearing. So I've been doing this for 22 years, right?
Yes.
And I remember going to places like Jamaica and Guyana, and I try to wrap my mind around how did they arrive there? What happened? And I'm living it now in Trinidad and Tobago to understand how one arrives there. And we've coined this cute but painful term, the working class. I remember meeting people in Haiti, and I said, why do you bother to go to work? They say we work for dignity. Because you want to get up, you want to put on your clothes, you want to be in that mental space to have something to do, to have something to look forward to. But in reality, your income is insufficient to meet your needs. And who would have thought a country that has boasted of trillions of dollars of oil will get to where we are today with no clear plans? And people say don't wax political, but you're not being political, but politics guides policies. And human beings are the politicians who guide policies. If you've got people who are in office that neither care or show any inkling or understand, because when you hear the politicians speak, whether it's an issue of food prices, whether it's on issues of quality of life overall, or crime, you realize that there's a divide, there's a big chasm between their reality and our reality. So if my salary is $30,000 or $40,000, and I have to spend $2,000-3,000 in books for my child, and I probably know the books owner anyway, my books are owned, and that's the challenge of life. The rich people get all the perks, and that's okay. We're not hitting on them. But we're saying, listen, we've given you a responsibility, you have a care of duty to at least see that we're good. So the $1,000 book grant is good. That's a step in the right direction. But there are other things that the government needs to look at too. Remember, if a child passes, as we say, pass for school, the Ministry of Education says one thing, says the schools are not supposed to charge these exorbitant fees. Some people run into the $2,000, right? So I have a child, the child has passed for I'm from the ghetto, I'm from the hood. I told my children, education is the way out of the ghetto. It's the way out of poverty. Then I can't get my child to go to school properly. My child goes to school disadvantaged. Teachers who come from the hood like ourselves, they embarrass the children. Like if it's a child, why are you beating a child for if a child don't have books? Why are you embarrassing a child? Is it that you hope that child will go home and put enough pressure on a parent who is really already stressed? So it's a whole societal conversation that we need to have. I'm 53, And these challenges have been there since my mom was a single mom, and back in the day, when you look young, your mommy milk on your face still. We used to get $40 for primary school children and $70 for secondary school children. And it would always come way after school opened. So I used to think as a child, well, maybe the government didn't know when school was opening, you know. And so we got to look at that. We have got to look at why are we replacing books so often? We know why it's a mafia and they're probably financing the politicians. And I don't put water in my mouth because I know what it is to see the frustrations, and my phone is inundated with tears and prayers from mom. Did you please at least? I was able to buy the shoes, but I couldn't buy the uniform. I got through with the book bag, but I didn't buy the shoes, and it still have books. Tons of books at the end of the term that have not been used by children. People who have an 8-year-old and a 10-year-old, and by the time the 8-year-old reaches up the next 2 years, the books are no longer valid. When you look at it, it's maybe 2-3 pages. One publisher doing a whole separate book. It has to be a cartel. It has to be a mafia. I mean, we're in the hood, we're not stupid. We know what time it is. Seems as though those who have the care of duty do not know what time it is. Why can't we look at a book, and why they said that how the ministry apparently has put out a directive? Has the directive reached the schools? No new, let's slow down the rate at which we have these new editions. And if I'm a teacher and I know what time it is, because based on the salaries of our teachers, which is very low, considering, I know what it is to struggle as a teacher, I'm going to beat the game. So you give me edition number 5, I'm going to go home with edition 5 and number 4. When I get to my class, so that takes care. I'm going to say, those who have edition number 5, it's page 40. Those who have editions number 4, it's page 35. And I beat the system. So we need to do whatever we can do, because we the people, we have to see how we can work towards a more just and equitable society. Otherwise, we're going to have more increase of crime, frustrations, and suicide, because people just can't cope and forget the government. Failure on all counts, whether it's mustard, whether it's ketchup. That is why if now we do what we have to do, because we understand that any change, it is sad because people receive salaries to do a job. But in reality, I know that as a citizen Avenel, if I'm going to see change in my lifetime, it will come from me making and doing whatever it is we can. And that's why we've been at it. We thank all our partners from overseas. I'll be engaged in the country.
I think we lost Mr. Avenel Hector Joseph there for a moment. Hopefully she can join us in a bit. The connection seems to have dropped. But I stick it a bit when she said if you're living under a rock, the middle class is disappearing. And that's exactly why I snickel, because it's how she phrased it. But she is absolutely right. When we speak about middle class in Trinidad and Tobago, for long it has been stated that is non-existent anymore. It's no longer something that we can speak about, and so what I'm curious to know more and more is that the Minister of Education spoke that we should be understanding how privileged we are because education in Trinidad and Tobago is free, and I'm wondering if that is speaking to how out of touch of a reality they are from the situation, because even though education in itself is free, access to education is something completely different. I think we're joined by Mr. Hector Joseph once more on the program.
Sorry about that, my phone dropped. And that point, there's so many anomalies in that statement that it angers me.
Mm-hmm.
You see, if I put food down the road, and the only way for you to get to that food is to walk, but you have no legs, I have a care of duty if I'm going to stand on political platforms or stand in the parliament and say, I put food down the road for you, to create a vehicle or an avenue for you to get to school. We want to talk about the quality of food that is served in a lot of our schools by a lot of these caterers, and I've had beef with even from the director go right down. Who in good conscience would serve the children some of those foods? Now, there are children who have the option, you say, oh, there's a lot of wastage. I would eat some of the food. There's some good caterers, but for by and large, I found the quality to be substandard. So we're looking at the quality of our schools, the fact that come September, as long as I've been living in Trinidad and Tobago, it seems as though we've suddenly realized that school is going to open come September. So there's always this mad rush. I haven't heard the arguments. There's normally that argument of data. Twitter says X amount of schools are not ready. The ministry said, no, that's not true. Through social media, we are now seeing real time in different schools, whether it was St. George's, Mayo, what is happening. Then they're putting the blame on the students, but what's happening now, why it is that schools are not prepared. Or children are going to classrooms are not prepared. You have certain schools where a lot of children from a certain class where they want or socioeconomic background, they are there. We're saying, okay, these children can't do academics, so they're going to do trade. When you go into the trade rooms, there's a particular school in Port of Spain. The equipment that is there is so outdated. It's like before 1970, and we have been asked to assist. So you're not serious. You're not serious with giving these children a proper education with academics. The books are beyond their parents. They're not getting proper school feeding. The schools are not ready. The equipment is not. And that is why we don't have an even playing field, because then you're going to put these children in society. It's like you impede certain people. You put a backpack of stones on some back, and then you let the others run. The other people who belong to school, I'm not hating. I came from a very poor background. My mother was among the first black girls to go to St. Joseph Convent, so she had an attitude. So I left home with a latrine, and I sat among the Sabgas on their booths. But that's not everybody's stories. Now, in those schools, when there's no teacher, the parents who have means will pay a teacher for the term or the past to people. You go to those other schools, there's no maths teacher. They are going to be sitting the same exam comes here. So we are not an equitable society. We are a very unjust society. And there are only certain people who benefit from the largesse of the state. Why is the minister saying we don't have enough money? Why are we wasting money? Why are there so many leaks? That's corruption. Anytime there's corruption, it means that legitimate funds are being illegitimately dispersed. So we don't have a money problem, no. We have a priority problem in Trinidad and Tobago. Because if any piece of rubbish come up now, like to buy votes for the elections, whoever, they all do it. They will find money to mama guy. But to get education, to get healthcare, especially for poor people in this country to benefit, no, they're not going to do that. So,
given your experience, are you going to see less and less people actually going to school, or actually sending their children to school because of this? You know, as this continues, is that parents are simply going to have to keep their children home because we can't send them to school?
Well, some parents, I've seen parents do it. I mean, it's very frustrating for a child because a lot of teachers are panty also. They are not sympathetic. Some are, not all. Some are, and some aren't. Some parents send their school, they try to school with a book. So they start, you start like a priority list. So you say, okay, at least get the uniform, it might fit. You see, you have a shoes, you have a bag. They get some copybooks. They're no longer using copybooks, they're using notebooks. If you have 3 children, right, a notebook is about $10, $15, and you need a notebook for every subject. So that alone is a bill. So it's okay, you're going to start with pens, pencils, notebooks, stationery. Some parents say, all I have is stationery, and they kind of buy the books. Why aren't we using things like ebooks? This is 2024, right? We're supposed to be the Mecca of the Caribbean. Why aren't we leading the way? But we're not going to do all those things because somebody had to eat some food, and we had to have the book. So when we have high absenteeism, children who go to school who tell the teacher, say, don't come back without your books, I hope nobody's doing those kind of things again, or children feel embarrassed, or children are afraid, it's a whole circle, it's a whole matrix. And it's something I think that different arms of government need to sit down, civil society. We're doing the best that we can for the most part. Like, if you went on social media in the last couple of months, almost every church, like, not almost, but there were tons of churches, mosques, mandirs, sporting organizations, individuals, even bookstores. People did what they can. We did what we could. And some are still doing. So we are still going through book lists. We are still seeing how we can help people who just find out a child is, just one a child in Maruga, we have to get to Maruga this weekend, no shoes. So we're doing what we can. But is the government aware of what is happening? And if they are aware, are they attending there? Because I'm saying, listen, this is something that we need to deal with, because we're going to have a literacy problem if children shy away from school. We're going to have a situation where we're going to have people not being qualified. We're going to have eventually low CXC results. We're going to have probably less than 50% of the children doing good at SA. Is anybody sitting down in the government, those that have a clear duty to say, there's a serious thing we're dealing with here, but I think they probably, like most things, they probably don't even know that there are plenty of people that didn't get books or are struggling still on the second day of the school term. You know, some people, the only books that they were able to buy is the ones that we have given them. And again, we have tons of books in good condition that people donated, but it's not the latest edition.
This is a huge issue I've been dealing with in my position, where I've had people call me in the office saying that they actually can't get these textbooks because the edition is one thing, the cost is another, but some of it is not even available in bookstores anymore. They can't even get access to it in bookstores. So even if they're making an effort to purchase it, they can't even get it. But this new edition, old edition situation, which has been happening since my time, is very frustrating because, as you said, sometimes it's a simple.
But it has exacerbated. It's gone crazy. It's gone crazy.
Go on, continue.
No, okay, so back in my day, you would see very vast differences, significant differences in the previous edition. Now, I mean, these people are shameless, man. They're shameless. No conscience, no conscience. But I understand if I'm a business person and they can use that book for the next 10 years and go make no money. I mean, it's laughing, but it's not funny. It's wicked. It's evil.
No, it's true because as you gave the example earlier, page 40, page 35. I know some teachers were making that effort, but for the most part,
it's a lot. You know, we shouldn't put that on the teacher, but we salute those teachers who understand and doing beyond the call of duty because they want their students to learn. But we shouldn't have them in that situation because there are so many other challenges that they have to deal with: deviant behavior, their pay grade, schools that are not properly equipped. So it's it's a lot, but it's going to affect the bottom line, which is the quality of education and how our attrition rate, how many children will stay the course. They gave us that drop-off rate during COVID. I'm interested in knowing within the last 2 years how many children dropped off because of social issues. And it's okay to send the agency to people's homes to deal with parents who don't send their children to school. But maybe we want to do some social studies as to why children are not going to school.
Well, I mean, if you want a good example as per this situation, you can drive up and down the highway. You see more and more children begging or even having to sell goods. You see them walking over the place having to sell goods or begging, and they're not in school. And that, by the way, is against the law. That's child labor. That is against the law. But that is the reality that, families are facing in TNT.
Yes. It's a sad reality. In a country that's oil rich. This is not Haiti.
People are arguing that we are getting there very silly. But Ms. Hector Joseph, we are out of time. Thank you very much for joining me on the program this morning. And of course, all the work that you have done and continue to do, we thank you very much. It certainly does not go unnoticed, and it is very much appreciated. So
it doesn't go unnoticed by the people, but the political director continues to ignore what we do, and that's okay because God have us and the people has been supporting. And we want to say heartfelt thanks to all corporate TNT and our grassroots base who have kept us going for the last 22 years. God bless each and every one of you, and thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you very much, and same to you, Ms. Hector Joseph. All the very best. The passion that stems from the frustration that we heard in Ms. Hector Joseph's commentary this morning is telling. For an individual who has been doing this for the last 22 years actually, since 2002, Is There Not a Cause has been working to assist others. Since 2003, they have been assisting those with getting ready for back to school, assisting them with school supplies and school books. It's really telling to see just how much Trinidad and Tobago has fallen. We have fallen. We have not sunk as yet, but our foundations are severely cracked. And as much as the minister said, don't let anybody tell you anything, there's still a lot sweet. This is Minister Stuart Young. There's still a lot sweet about TNT. I agree. TNT is very much sweet. But you may disagree with me because I may sound very crude, but it's the people and the politicians and the politics that have ruined Trinidad and Tobago. And that, ladies and gentlemen, has to change. Because if you think I'm speaking something that is totally off the topic of discussion, then really you need to examine things a bit further and a bit deeper. All of this affects the way we live, and even our ability to wake up in the morning and send our children to school. with everything that they need to get that free education. Ladies and gentlemen, let's take a break here on the program. We'll be right back.
Here is your WESN News on the Hour. I'm Naomi McNish. Thanks for joining us. Here are the headlines. Christmas list to challenge deportation. Moneylender found murdered. Akeem Stewart to receive $150,000 reward for Paralympic silver. And internationally, Boeing offers staff 25% pay hike in bid to avoid strike. Now for the details. Attorneys for Canadian YouTuber Christopher Christmas List Hughes are expected to approach the High Court in the coming days to challenge his deportation. Hughes, 45, who is before the court on a sedation charge, was arrested for a third time on September 7th at the house in Diego Martin, where he had been ordered to stay as part of his bail conditions. Since his arrest on Saturday, Hughes has been detained at the Immigration Detention Center in Aripo. Justice Kevin Ramcharan granted an emergency injunction on September 9th to allow his attorneys to get access to him for instructions. The Minister of National Security also signed a deportation order. A moneylender was suspected to have been strangled during a robbery in his Cunupia home on Sunday morning. Richard Mervyn Ligue, 64, who was also a landlord, was found dead with a belt fastened around his neck. The body was found in the apartment in which he resided on his property on the corner of Marshall Trace and Marshall Trace Extension. A police report stated that Ligue was found unresponsive by relatives who went to check on him around 10 a.m. The front door of Ligue's apartment was open and he was discovered lying on the floor of a bedroom with a black belt tied around his neck. The bedroom was ransacked. Missing were a quantity of gold jewelry and $40,000 that was hidden beneath a mattress in the bedroom. Police inquiries revealed that Ligue was last seen around 11 p.m. on Saturday in company with a Venezuelan man and woman. The body was removed to a funeral home in Chaguanas pending a post-mortem at the Forensic Science Center this week. Three-time Paralympic Games medalist Akeem Stewart will be awarded $150,000 from the Ministry of Sport and Community Development for his men's discus F64 silver in Paris, France on September 5th. Stewart's financial bonus is part of the ministry's National Incentives Reward Framework, a policy designed to honor athletes who achieve medals at the highest levels of international competition across various sports. The para-athlete TT's sole competitor earned the podium spot after he launched the disc a season's best distance of 59.66 meters. Internationally, Boeing is offering its staff a 25% pay rise over 4 years in a bid to avoid a strike that could potentially shut down its assembly lines as early as Friday. Union leaders representing more than 30,000 employees have urged the workers to support the proposal, describing it as the best contract they had ever negotiated. If approved, the agreement would be an important achievement for Boeing's new chief executive, Kelly Ortberg, who faces pressure to fix the company's quality and reputational issues. Boeing workers in the Seattle and Portland region are set to vote on the deal on Thursday. If the deal is rejected, however, a second ballot will need to be approved by 2/3 of union members for a strike to go ahead. In a video message to Boeing workers, the aerospace giant's chief operating officer, Stephanie Pope, described the proposal as a historic offer. If ratified by members of the International Association of Machinists and Aerospace Workers Union, it would be the first full labor agreement between the firm and the unions in 16 years. Well, that's news to the hour on WESN. I'm Naomi McNish. Thanks for watching.
Welcome back to the program, ladies and gentlemen, as we continue with the conversation, getting into our final topic. What is driving teenagers to a life of crime? Is it the lifestyle? Some people have argued that's exactly what they see happening. It's the lifestyle. Is it a breakdown in communities that that notion that it takes a village to raise a child is no longer applicable to TNT as a whole? Is it poverty? In fact, that is the suggestion of my guest this morning, clinical traumatologist and the president for the Center for Human Development Limited, Hanif Benjamin, who's arguing that poverty is one of the main driving forces behind teens' involvement in crime. He joins us this morning on the program. Good morning, Mr. Benjamin. It's good to see you.
Yes, sir. Good morning, Kichan. It's always a pleasure to be here and to share a light conversation with you and your viewers.
Indeed. Well, Mr. Benjamin, when we speak about teenagers and crime, or when we speak about those going to a life of crime, oftentimes people argue poverty. There are some who say that you cannot explicitly link poverty to a life of crime. You cannot link poverty or the economy to a life of crime at all. And there are those who suggest that there is a definite link. People commit crime out of desperation. But is us suggesting that poverty is driving teens to be involved in crime just us finding some level of excuses? Because we all have an understanding of what's right and what's wrong.
I think we have gone far beyond the concept of right and wrong. I think that that the old adage of you know what is right and you should do what is right sometimes is overrun by the need to survive. It is overrun by your social environment. It is overrun by the influences around you. And I think for many of us, we are still holding on to these old adages that try to explain where we are as a society. But we have not yet understood that society has far moved. And I keep making the point that it is illogical of us to want to be part of the global village and to import all good things globally, but not expect that the negative of the global impact will also come, right? So I am not surprised where we are in terms of the crime and criminality, because we are part of the global village where Trinidad and Tobago is situated, and coming out of COVID-19 and what that did to the economy, what it did to people, we must or should have taken note that we are heading in this direction. And so it is not just that people want an excuse, or is it that people say it's poverty. I say it is a myriad of things, including poverty, which I believe is one of the driving force. I also believe that crime mainly is a social situation. And if we keep treating it solely as police and baton and flashlight and gun, we will never arrest the situation of crime. Because crime has moved psychologically. And if we don't understand the psychology of crime, if we don't understand the society in which we live, if we don't understand what people are going through, then we'll never be able to mitigate those factors.
Well, you said the psychology associated with crime, and you spoke about the global village. Do you think that push towards this global village and this attitude, because you spoke about the psychology, this attitude that you need to get rich fast, get rich quick, or die trying, do you think that has corrupted the minds of many teenagers?
Of course it has, right? Because we see people, you see, we have to be very careful as leaders, huh? Because we create a scenario where we tell people what they should aspire to, whether it is in the goodness of sense or in the badness. In our music, in our role models, and all of these things, we're saying to people that you should get the fast car, you should get the nice car, you should get the gold chain, you should aspire to be. On one hand, they're saying that you need to go to school and you need to study your work, and many of us went to school. We went all the way up to university and we're home without a job. So you're home for 4 years with a degree, sometime a bachelor's, sometime a master's. And so you start to ask yourself what really they meant by doing these things. What is it for? Keisha, so we have to ask ourselves, a lot of young people are saying, well, then it don't make sense going to school. Because if my brother went to school and he's home without a job, what am I going to school for? Or this man who never went to school a day, he has all the money, all the girls, all the jewelry in the world. So that is also a major part. But Keisha, what that is tied to is a cognitive inability or the cognitive challenges. It means that we are not selling the right message to our young people. We are not creating the correct environment for young people to aspire to work hard and to toil. Young people want instant gratification. They want things now, and they are willing to do what it takes to get it now. But if we create the scenario where we can enhance our young people's intellect, and I'm not just talking about math and English, I'm talking about teaching young people life, helping them to see and understand the beauty about life before the corruptible elements step in. Because when these elements step in, it becomes extremely difficult to move them away from this. Now, when you couple this with survival, we're in problems. Because when a young person has to survive, they don't want to hear about working for $10, $20 an hour. They want it and they want it now. And if somebody presents them with an opportunity where they can get it and they can get it quickly, that is what they will do.
So then, Mr. Benjamin, how do we bring back a sense of stability to society? If you're saying that we have to examine these factors more in depth, that is not just about police and soldiers and gun and battle, how do we now bring back a sense of stability to society? How do we get back to that point of examining that notion that we had the opportunity to grow up in, where it takes a village to raise a child?
I think Trinidad and Tobago has become very selfish in its nature. Everyone kind of looking out for themselves. And to some degree, some people would say you can't blame them for that. And, I would agree with that as well. But we need to understand child and adolescent development differently. Just like we want to engage in the village, the global village and stuff, we also need to understand that the way we bring up our young people is very different to the way we were brought up. And we cannot, in the main, hold on to the things in the past thinking that it will work now. Our young people have before them stimuli from all walks of life. 24/7, 365 internet usage, real life, people who call themselves role models. So we have to go back to the moorings of taking young people and molding them differently. We have to bring back our after-school activities, keep them involved. We need to begin to look at innovation. We need to look at our education system, which is failing, right? We need to help move away from the 1980s and bring education into the 21st, almost 22nd century. We need to change the way we interact with young people. Young people are no longer stimulated by what we were stimulated by. We have to change the conversation with our young people.
But Mr. Benjamin, forgive me, I know you said that how, actually,
and we need opportunities and that for sustainability. We need to tap into the untapped area of young people's mind and bring them forward. So it means, teacher, that we have to understand.
Mr. Benjamin,
my internet,
yeah, it's giving some trouble.
Are you there?
Yes, I can hear you. It is giving some trouble, but you are with us, and that's most important. So let me try.
I think I don't internet because.
We will try to get as much in as possible. But I know you mentioned after school activities and our education system. There are many young people who are simply not even in the education system. So if we speak about after school activities, is that something that even makes sense if children aren't in school for day activities?
Well, Kishan, I don't agree with that statement, right? I really don't agree with that statement in terms of the children who are not in school, the percentage of children who are not engaged in school, I believe, is a very small figure in relation to the amount of children who are in school, right? There are more children in school who are not. And for those children who are not in school, I also believe that the Ministry of Education and other stakeholders need to work together to figure out why they are not in school and to bring them back in school. But I believe that there are more children in school. Whether I believe the facts are there are more children in school than there are not. And so we cannot not do anything. So while we work to bring those who may not be in the school system back into the school system, we should also work with the children who are already in the school system to ensure that we don't lose them. But more importantly, we need to also examine whether those children who are not in the school system really need to be in the traditional sense of the school system, or we need to create other types of scenarios. For example, more trade and tech type of school, just like St. Lucia, who has one of the largest technical secondary school, right, in the Caribbean, and Jamaica also have some technical schools. Maybe we need to have some technical secondary school specialized just to deal with developing skill set, because you and I both know that the skill demand, the skilled labor demand is very limited in Trinidad and Tobago. And the question is, why are we not developing more skills? And so maybe we need to divest and re-examine the way we educate, because there are some, because Kishan, our school system is sometimes the very first gang. When the child cannot comprehend in the school, when they have to be put out of class, they go and they congregate somewhere where all the other students have been put out. And that becomes the very first gang. And then some smart boy from outside have a little piece of weed on them, and that's how we start. Hey, you know, we could make money that way. And so we need to examine whether the traditional school is for everyone. And maybe we need to, from primary school, we know whether these children will excel in academia, in skills, in computer. We need to begin very early in moving children along a continuum. The reason we're having so many issues is a lot of our children cannot navigate from 1 to 5 successfully.
If society is evolving so quickly, and I'm glad that you actually said that what we experienced growing up may not necessarily be applicable to today. So society is evolving so quickly. Why is it that a societal approach to these situations are not evolving as well? Why is there, society is progressing, it's moving forward, and even though we are a part of society, our approach to things seems to be yesteryear?
And we are, that is a powerful question that requires a whole panel discussion. But for me, Trinidad and Tobago sits on such a powerful precipice. When I work throughout the Caribbean, I work in about 8 different Caribbean countries. And when you move through the Caribbean and you really examine Trinidad, we are, like people call Trinidad the little New York of the Caribbean, because they see us, but Trinidad don't see themselves in a powerful way. Our minds are myopic, we are politically stupid, we are emotionally illiterate, and we don't understand that as a country we can excel exponentially. We have everything, including brilliant people who can move Trinidad beyond. But we are so caught up in racism, we are caught up in classism, we are caught up in 5-year-ism, meaning the political parties only trying to survive to make sure they go on to another 5-year. So they're going to do but so much. A lot of times they don't want to take hard decisions, because hard decisions mean political suicide. And so we are tied in this place of stagnation as a country who is celebrating 62 years. And while we have moved, I have seen the potential of Trinidad and Tobago. When you go up the Caribbean, Keisha, everything in the supermarket 90% is made in Trinidad and Tobago. When you go to the Caribbean, 90% of what they build and they design is Trinidad and Tobago. They want skilled people from Trinidad and Tobago, and we as a country sit here and try to figure out why we're not moving. That is why I say the conversation is a wider conversation. When it comes to education, we go to conferences left, right, and center. We are part of the global village, and we are seeing Singapore, New Zealand, we are seeing all these places, how they have transformed education. But yet we struggle with SCA foolishness. We still doing SCA. And I am trying to understand as a people, how have we not moved mentally to where we need to go? And that's a serious, deep question that as a country we need to understand.
Well, Mr. Benjamin, we don't have a lot of time left, but in your opinion, if it is that Trinbagonians do not necessarily recognize or understand their full potential, are we therefore in a position to help our young people or the future of Trinbago recognize or understand what their potential is, what it can be, what they can be?
We are not doing a good job at it. Our universities are failing. We are not doing a good job at moving young people. And the conundrum we are facing, Keisha, is the young people are now going beyond Trinidad, and they are now experiencing that growth mindset internationally, and they are now battling. So if you notice, there's a lot of battle between the older workers and younger workers in companies. And you realize that young people are not staying in jobs 3 years or more. They're going 2 years, 3 years, and they're moving on because they are going beyond Trinidad in the growth mindset, and they are trying to move themselves forward for those who have that propelling belief. And the challenge is, so they are fighting a system, and so we have now gridlock. And so we have the young ones who are not able to do it by themselves. We have the young people like you and I who are in the middle. They're trying to make it, and you have to now fight a system whose mindset is small. And so we have a really, really stalemate in what we can do. Hence, a lot of people, once they can, they migrate. They take what they can from the country as best as they can, and then they leave. And so if we really want to treat with crime, if we really want to treat with the criminogenic factors, if we really want to treat with mental health, we must move our minds out of 1962 and recognize that Trinidad is a great country and can do greater things if we are able to put aside small-mindedness and really build on a country. We will do so well as a little gem in this corner of the world.
Mr. Benjamin, I want to thank you very much for joining me on the program this morning. Thank you, of course, for your time as always and your contribution. It is always a pleasure, sir.
Pleasure. May God bless.
Take care. All the very best to you. Well, ladies and gentlemen, it hits you very hard. I mean, I spoke earlier in respect to Trinidad and Tobago, just how far we've fallen. But Mr. Benjamin, using that example as to how when you go up the islands, you probably then have an understanding as to just how much of a player Trinidad and Tobago is, not just regionally, but we can also be globally. We've seen our potential globally as well. This little tiny island. Why is it that with all that we have been blessed with, all the goods that exist, that we can't pass on to the next generation? I agree, we are feeling the next generation. And that's the thing. No amount of press conferences and no amount of words will actually help that situation. It's a matter of action. And you don't have to wait for those above you to act. Society, the household, the family have a crucial role to play. And if you don't act now, then this conversation I had with Mr. Benjamin this morning, you'll see it again happening next year. Ladies and gentlemen, that's it for EM Prime this morning. Thank you very much to all my guests for joining me on the program. And thank you, of course, for you, the viewer. It is always a pleasure indeed. To my team in WESN, Ryan Gomez-Burke is back in his chair, and Milo is actually back in his they swapped over the last few weeks. So we thank them, of course, for being with us and for ensuring that AM Prime goes live. I'm Keaton Shaw. I remind you that today is a good day to have a good day. And I'll see you again very soon. Bye-bye.
WESN.
Folks, we're back and better than ever.
Your show have always appeared to be a show that is focused on going to the cause or looking to the cause.
We hardly ever talk about the white-collar crime, though. We always talk about the ones that involve more as physical violence against individuals.
The citizens will only measure transmission when water starts to flow through their taps.
Because vision doesn't talk about local election.
Contract mafia that's responsible for looting the country and they own and operate these politicians.
So if you are running a country and you can't say nothing as a prime minister, please take up your bag and go.
It is not comparative to the murder figures, but it is in fact very high.
I believe he's protecting certain individuals.
This is 10 Questions. I'm Andy Johnson. The distance from where we should be in the world in going forward on our commitments with climate change.
The effects of climate change that cannot be accounted for, it's called loss and damage. And we're seeing loss and damage happening so much more in this decade and the previous decade.
The principal term there was this question of the correspondent banking issues.
That is why we're trying to build capacity with this country here, Trinidad and Tobago, and other countries in the region. Man is not showing any signs of stopping or even slowing down. More than half of the forest in Trinidad is already gone.
All the plants and all the animals and all of the nice clean water and fresh air and everything had to be on this planet for humanity to have a chance.
We have small change when it comes to countries that can take decisions, and when they speak, the world listens.
The General Assembly is a very democratic forum. And Trinidad and Tobago has the same vote as Canada, in spite of the obvious difference in size.
You are watching Strictly Legal on WESN Content Capital. Just give an overview of what exactly is that split arrangement.
Now you don't need to register nothing. We can do that another time. But then it becomes a hit, and then everybody starts to want to claim.
The laws that predate many of the independent countries' constitutions are going to be those colonial laws.
We know there are an infinite amount of circumstances that would lead to a murder.
I have a great idea and I have a great concept, but until it's actually expressed, it does not become intellectual property.
Accomplishments or targets of a forensic accountant is to quantify what may have been lost.
We believe we defend criminals and we manipulated the law and we exploited the system.
A responsible journalist will reach out to the person who they have the information on for a comment.
Join me, Dr. Nalini Kokram, on What's Up Doc, where we discuss all your burning questions concerning health.
Trinidad and Tobago is among one of the highest risk group of patients that develop this form of genetic breast cancer.
What I'd like to take home from a short interview like this, screening. You must screen.
Because it's silent.
It's silent.
Yeah.
And because it's silent, you don't know it's there.
What's Up Doc, every Tuesday and Thursday on WESN Content Capital.